Walk through any modern city anywhere in the world, and the problem becomes obvious. Concrete, asphalt, glass, steel, streets and buildings that shine in the sun but trap every ounce of heat. Wide boulevards swallow up the breeze, skyscrapers create wind tunnels that whip around corners unpredictably. Cars hum in traffic, air conditioners roar, and heat waves turn neighborhoods into ovens. Modern cities, for all their supposed efficiency, are failing at the most basic purpose of urban life, protecting the people who live in them. Cities today are built for speed, profit, and uniformity. They're designed to maximize land use, increase real estate value, and handle traffic flow. Efficiency is celebrated, but efficiency is not the same as sustainability. Efficiency does not equal comfort, and efficiency does not equal survival in the face of climate. Take, for example, Phoenix, Arizona. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 110 degrees, streets radiate heat, parking lots reflect it back. Into the air, glass towers amplify it further. Residents escape into air-conditioned buildings, only to emerge hours later into an urban oven. Energy demand soars. The city compensates with air conditioning that consumes power, generating more heat in a feedback loop. Roads crack, pavements warp. Even the trees that survive struggle to thrive in heat islands. In essence, the city fights against nature and loses. Now compare that to an ancient Egyptian city along the Nile. Narrow streets were not a mistake. They were deliberate, angled to provide maximum shade during the day. Houses were clustered tightly together, forming natural wind corridors that cooled entire neighborhoods. Thick mud brick walls absorbed heat slowly, keeping interiors cool while releasing warmth at night. Roofs and courtyards weren't decorative. They were functional, designed to catch evening breezes or store water for cooling. Every architectural decision considered the sun, the wind, and the desert heat. Egyptians didn't build cities in spite of the climate. They built with it. And it wasn't just about comfort. Climate-conscious design was a matter of survival. The desert could be relentless. Heat stroke, dehydration, dust storms, sudden flash floods, these weren't abstract threats. They were everyday realities. A city that failed to account for climate could mean death, disease, and collapse. Yet ancient Egyptian urban planners and builders understood the desert in ways we seem to have forgotten. Modern cities, by contrast, create entirely new problems. Heat islands make summers unbearable. Flooded streets appear after rains that would have been absorbed naturally by soil centuries ago. Pollution is trapped, compounding health risks. Water scarcity is worsened by runoff and impermeable surfaces. We build massive systems to combat the consequences of ignoring climate. Air conditioning, drainage systems, water treatment plants, expensive infrastructure meant to fight problems we could have avoided entirely. And this disconnect goes beyond materials and streets. It's in the mindset. Modern urban design treats climate as an obstacle to overcome. Ancient Egyptians treated it as a partner to work with. They observed wind patterns, the flow of the Nile, the trajectory of the sun across the sky. They experimented with building orientation, street width, courtyard placement, roof design. Trial and error over centuries led to cities that were comfortable, functional, and resilient. Think about it. Modern cities are measured by growth, efficiency, and profit. Ancient Egyptian cities were measured by survival, comfort, and harmony with the environment. One is built for convenience in the short term, the other is built to endure for millennia. And yet, we call our modern cities advanced. The truth is, the disconnect is not accidental. Modern materials, construction methods, and planning prioritize speed, cost, and visual impact over climate adaptability. Steel, glass, and concrete may be strong, but they are thermal traps. Asphalt roads absorb heat. Reflective glass walls redirect it. Urban layouts ignore natural wind paths. Courtyards and greenery are decorative rather than functional. Cities are fighting the very forces they should harness. And every time we ignore climate, the consequences accumulate. Energy consumption soars. Heat waves become deadly. Floods become devastating. Public health suffers. And still, the cycle repeats, as if the knowledge of building in harmony with climate never existed. Ancient Egyptians didn't just survive the desert, they thrived in it. Their cities worked with the sun, the wind, and the Nile. Modern cities? We fight nature at every turn, and we pay the price with heat, energy, and human discomfort. The secret to ancient Egyptian cities wasn't in fancy machines or modern technology. It was in the way they used the most basic building materials and the way they thought about the sun, the wind, and the desert. Mud bricks, narrow streets, strategic building orientation. These weren't just architectural choices, they were survival strategies perfected over thousands of years. And they worked. Take mud bricks. At first glance, they seem simple. Sun-dried bricks made of mud and straw. Cheap, easy to produce. Yet their simplicity is deceptive. Mud bricks have natural thermal mass, which means they absorb heat slowly during the day and release it gradually at night. A thick mud brick wall shields interiors from the scorching midday sun, keeping homes cool. By night, it releases warmth, preventing the sudden cold that deserts bring. Modern materials, steel, concrete, glass, do the opposite. They trap heat, creating urban ovens that can push temperatures 10 or 15 degrees higher than the surrounding countryside. And mud bricks aren't just practical, they're breathable. They allow air to circulate through walls, reducing humidity and cooling indoor spaces naturally. Concrete walls? Completely sealed. Heat builds, air stagnates. Comfort is impossible without air conditioning. But mud bricks alone weren't enough. Orientation was just as critical. Ancient Egyptian architects observed the trajectory of the sun across the sky, the prevailing winds, and the flow of the Nile. They aligned streets and buildings to maximize shade during the hottest hours, to capture breezes for ventilation, and to ensure that water from the Nile could be used effectively for cooling. Buildings weren't placed arbitrarily, they were laid out with precision. Streets ran north-south to avoid direct sunlight on the walls, creating corridors of shade. Courtyards were placed to trap wind and circulate it through living spaces. This orientation wasn't a minor detail, it dictated the daily rhythm of life. Narrow alleys allowed people to walk in shade even at noon. Roofs were not just flat platforms, they were living spaces for sleeping during hot nights, ventilated by wind towers that drew air upward and out, cooling the rooms below. Even windows weren't left to chance. Small, high windows reduced the sun's heat while allowing air to move freely. Modern cities, in contrast, favor giant glass facades that magnify heat and block airflow, creating buildings that are uncomfortable without artificial cooling. The Egyptians also integrated the natural environment into their designs. Water wasn't just for drinking or irrigation, it was a passive cooling system. Courtyards and pools reflected sunlight, cooled the surrounding air through evaporation, and moderated humidity levels. Mud brick walls absorbed the heat and released it slowly, while water in pools and channels reduced the ambient temperature. Modern cities? Rainwater disappears into concrete drains. Green spaces are ornamental, not functional. Air conditioners battle the heat, but the root problem remains. Our buildings ignore the climate rather than work with it. What's remarkable is that all of this required no advanced technology, no electricity, no HVAC systems, no industrial machinery, just observation, experimentation, and an understanding of natural principles. Architects learned which streets stayed cooler at which times, which wall thicknesses worked best, and which materials retained comfort over the harshest heat. The result was a city that was resilient, functional, and sustainable. Contrast that with today. Steel and glass might look impressive, but they're fundamentally maladapted to their environment. Concrete traps heat, glass reflects it into streets, and urban planners often ignore wind patterns entirely. Modern buildings fight nature instead of working with it. Air conditioning becomes a crutch, not a solution. Energy bills soar, heat waves become deadly, and still, we admire glass towers as symbols of progress. Ancient Egyptian cities teach us a lesson that modern planners often forget. Designing with climate in mind isn't optional, it's survival. Mud, bricks, building orientation, and natural ventilation weren't decorative. They were the foundation of comfortable, resilient urban life. The Egyptians didn't just adapt to the desert, they mastered it. Modern cities? We're still learning that lesson, often at the cost of energy, health, and comfort. If mud bricks and building orientation were the skeleton of ancient Egyptian cities, water and shade were their lifeblood. The Egyptians understood something modern cities have largely forgotten. Nature is not just decoration, it's infrastructure. Trees, canals, pools, courtyards, and reeds weren't aesthetic choices. They were deliberate, functional tools designed to make life in the desert livable. Take the courtyard, for example. Modern architects often see courtyards as luxuries, a bit of open space in a dense city block. In ancient Egypt, courtyards were vital. They were private oases of shade, reducing the heat inside homes and public buildings. By concentrating sunlight away from living spaces, they lowered the ambient temperature. High walls around the courtyard created wind tunnels, channeling breezes through shaded areas to cool the interior. Pools, or small water features in these courtyards, added evaporative cooling. As water evaporated, it absorbed heat from the surrounding air, lowering temperatures and adding humidity in the arid desert climate. Trees weren't planted for beauty either. Palms, acacias, and sycamores were carefully positioned along streets, in courtyards, and around temples. Their shade blocked the harshest sun, while their leaves filtered the wind, reducing dust and sandstorms. Modern cities cut down trees for parking lots, roads, and skyscrapers. Concrete and asphalt dominate the landscape. The result? Heat islands where temperatures soar far above the natural environment. Ancient Egyptians knew that shade wasn't just comfort, it was survival. Water was another element integrated into urban life. The Nile was more than a river, it was a climate regulator. Cities hugged the riverbanks to take advantage of prevailing winds. Evaporative cooling from canals and pools lowered the air temperature and made dense urban centers breathable. Rainwater and floodwaters were channeled into cisterns and pools, stored for use in irrigation and cooling. Every drop served multiple purposes: human consumption, agriculture, and passive climate control. Modern cities, by contrast, often funnel rainwater into storm drains, sending it away as waste. We rely on pumps and energy-intensive cooling systems to compensate for what could have been a natural climate solution. Even streets themselves were designed to work with nature. Narrow lanes and alleyways created alternating patches of sun and shade throughout the day. As the sun moved across the sky, these streets naturally cooled different parts of the city. Sidewalks weren't wide-open concrete. They were often shaded by buildings, trees, or overhangs. Compare that to modern city planning. Streets are broad, asphalt absorbs heat, and sunlight bounces off glass towers. Wind doesn't circulate, it becomes trapped or funneled into dangerous gusts. The Egyptians understood that proper placement of buildings and vegetation could regulate temperatures without a single kilowatt of electricity. The genius of Egyptian urban design is in its systemic thinking. Every element, mud bricks, courtyards, pools, canals, trees, worked together. Water cooled the air, shade blocked direct sunlight, streets channeled wind, and building materials moderated heat gain. The result wasn't just comfort, it was survival. People could work, trade, pray, and live in harsh climates without modern technology. Modern cities, however, treat these elements as optional. Trees are removed for parking, water features are purely decorative, streets are wide, sun-baked, and exposed. Air conditioners replace shade, concrete channels replace canals. In doing so, we've turned cities into machines that fight against nature instead of cooperating with it. We pay the price in soaring energy costs, heat-related illnesses, and reduced livability. The lesson is clear: nature is not ornamental, it's infrastructure. Shade is a tool, water is a tool. Trees are structural elements in climate design. Ancient Egyptians understood this intuitively and intentionally. Modern cities? We're still catching up, and often at a cost we don't realize. By embracing the principles of water and shade, urban planners today can create cities that are cooler, healthier, and more resilient. The Egyptians didn't just survive in the desert, they thrived. Modern cities can do the same if we remember the lessons buried in the sand. The brilliance of ancient Egyptian cities wasn't just in keeping interiors cool or streets shaded, it was in resilience. These cities were built to survive, not just aesthetically impress, they were designed to endure the desert's extremes: scorching heat, sudden floods, relentless winds, and even sandstorms. Modern cities, despite all their technology, often crumble under conditions that the Egyptians handled daily. And that contrast reveals a lesson we desperately need today. Designing for climate isn't optional, it's survival. Think about the Nile. Every year, the river flooded predictably, delivering nutrient-rich silt, but also threatening homes and granaries. Ancient Egyptians didn't fight the floods, they adapted to them. Cities were raised on slightly elevated platforms, granaries were built on stilts or raised foundations to protect stored grain. Streets and canals directed water away from homes while still harnessing it for irrigation. Modern cities, by contrast, often try to confine rivers with concrete levees, flood channels, or underground drains. When these fail, even minor floods cause catastrophic damage. Egyptians designed cities that worked with nature rather than against it. Windstorms and desert sand were another constant challenge. The Egyptians didn't erect walls that simply blocked the wind. They used architecture to control it. Narrow streets funneled airflow in controlled directions, while courtyards and alleys broke up sandstorms before they could infiltrate living spaces. Roofs and terraces often incorporated wind-catching elements to ventilate interiors naturally. Modern urban planners rarely consider wind at street level. Glass towers reflect wind unpredictably, creating gusts that knock over pedestrians. Streets without vegetation or buffer zones become dust traps. The Egyptians' thoughtful design reduced the impact of environmental hazards, allowing daily life to continue unhindered. Heat, of course, was perhaps the most constant threat. Temperatures soared in the daytime desert sun, yet ancient cities thrived. Thick mud brick walls, small strategically placed windows, high ceilings, shaded courtyards, and reflective surfaces all worked in combination. Thermal mass in buildings absorbed heat during the day and released it at night. Natural ventilation carried cool night air indoors. Water features, shaded vegetation, and narrow streets kept temperatures manageable even at midday. It was a system designed for long-term comfort without technology. Modern cities, for all their air conditioning and HVAC systems, are far less resilient. A power outage in a modern metropolis during a heat wave can be deadly. Ancient Egyptian cities had no such dependency. Their design was self-sustaining. Resilience in Egyptian urban planning wasn't just structural, it was social and adaptive. Public spaces, marketplaces, and courtyards were designed to foster communal life, ensuring people could move, trade, and gather safely even during extreme conditions. Streets were intentionally narrow to create shade, but wide enough to allow traffic and transport. Buildings were oriented to maximize wind exposure while minimizing sun exposure. Every element served multiple purposes: comfort, safety, utility, and climate adaptation. Modern cities, with their zoning laws and rigid layouts, often sacrifice this multifunctionality for the sake of standardization. The Egyptians also built for the long term. Cities were durable and repairable. Mud bricks could be rebuilt, canals dredged, and streets reshaped with local labor and materials. Modern urban infrastructure, heavily reliant on industrial materials and machinery, often collapses under stress because it cannot flex or adapt. Ancient cities grew with the environment rather than against it. Ultimately, the lesson is clear: resilience is systemic. It isn't just about strong walls, flood channels, or shade. It's about thinking in terms of the entire ecosystem: climate, wind, water, materials, and human activity. Ancient Egyptian urban planners mastered this ecosystem. Modern cities, in contrast, are frequently fragile, ignoring the climate in favor of speed, efficiency, or aesthetics. If we study these ancient practices, we see a blueprint for adaptation. By combining natural materials, smart orientation, wind and water management, and multifunctional spaces, modern urban planners can create cities that withstand floods, storms, heat waves, and other climate challenges. The Egyptians didn't just survive, they thrived in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Modern cities have the technology to do the same, but first, we must remember the lessons buried in the sands of time. The brilliance of ancient Egyptian cities wasn't just historical trivia, it's a lesson with immediate relevance. The way they designed streets, buildings, and public spaces wasn't arbitrary. It was deliberate, tested over centuries, and tuned to survive one of the harshest climates on Earth. Modern cities, despite technology and engineering, often ignore these lessons, and the consequences are all around us. Walk through any modern metropolis. Heat waves are no longer rare. Anomalies, they're deadly. Floods overwhelm streets that were once considered well-engineered. Energy bills spiral out of control as air conditioners struggle to cool glass and concrete towers that trap heat instead of releasing it. Air pollution becomes worse because streets and buildings block natural airflow. The very infrastructure meant to serve us is failing, not because we lack innovation, but because we've forgotten how to work with nature. Take urban heat islands, for example. Cities like Los Angeles, Dubai, or Phoenix can be 10 to 15 degrees hotter than surrounding rural areas. Asphalt, concrete, and glass absorb sunlight during the day and radiate it at night. Wide streets and towering skyscrapers block airflow. Trees are sparse, water is channeled away, and reflective surfaces magnify the heat. People need artificial cooling to survive. Ancient Egyptian streets never needed that. Narrow alleys, shaded courtyards, reflective mud bricks, and water features kept temperatures manageable, even at peak heat. The Egyptians weren't primitive. They were climate engineers long before the term existed. Flooding is another consequence of ignoring climate in urban planning. In many modern cities, rainwater is funneled into drains and pipes, disappearing from the natural landscape. Impermeable surfaces prevent absorption, and drainage systems can't always cope with extreme events. Flash floods damage property, disrupt transportation, and endanger lives. In ancient Egyptian cities, canals, raised platforms, and well-planned streets allowed water to flow naturally without harming homes. Floodwaters nourished the land and cooled the city simultaneously. Nature wasn't a problem to fight, it was a partner to work with. The health impact is real. Heat waves cause thousands of deaths every year. Poor ventilation, limited shade, and excessive sun exposure exacerbate respiratory problems and cardiovascular stress. Energy-intensive cooling contributes to pollution, which worsens health further. In contrast, an ancient Egyptian neighborhood provided natural ventilation, shade, and passive cooling, conditions that allowed people to live, work, and thrive in the desert without mechanical systems. Modern cities can learn from this ancient wisdom, but only if we pay attention. Principles like thermal mass, orientation to sun and wind, integration of water and greenery, and narrow shaded streets are not futuristic ideas. They are millennia-old solutions proven to work. They reduce energy demand, enhance comfort, and increase resilience to extreme weather. In a world facing climate change, rising temperatures, and more frequent storms, these lessons are not optional, they are essential. Even small changes make a difference. Trees planted strategically along streets reduce heat and improve air quality. Water features or canals lower ambient temperatures. Buildings designed to maximize cross-ventilation can eliminate the need for artificial cooling in many cases. Orientation, materials, and landscaping, all informed by ancient principles, can transform a neighborhood from an urban oven into a livable environment. The consequences of ignoring these lessons are already visible. Energy consumption, heat-related mortality, and urban flooding are rising. Yet cities continue to prioritize aesthetics, speed, and short-term efficiency over climate-smart design. Ancient Egyptian cities survived for thousands of years in one of the harshest climates on Earth. Modern cities, with all our technology, often struggle to survive a single heat wave. The takeaway is simple, but profound. Working with nature isn't optional. It's the only path to resilience. Ancient Egyptians didn't just survive the desert, they mastered it. They designed cities that were comfortable, safe, and sustainable without electricity, air conditioning, or modern machinery. Their lessons remain relevant today, offering a blueprint for cities that can thrive in the face of heat, storms, and rising global temperatures. Modern urban planners, architects, and citizens have a choice. Continue building against nature or learn from thousands of years of wisdom buried in the sands of Egypt. Every street, every courtyard, every canal tells a story of resilience. And every decision we make in our cities today determines whether we thrive or struggle in the climate of tomorrow.